this heaven?
No. It's Iowa.
From high school to international wrestling, on the mat and beyond, this is the Potentially Dangerous Podcast with the guys from IA Wrestle.
If you're a fighter, you like a fight. If you're an American, you like a fight. If you're an Iowa Hawkeye, you know you're going to get a fight.
Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and all your podcast-friendly apps. And follow us on social media platforms at IA Wrestle. Time to strap it up and get to the show.
Welcome back to Potentially Dangerous. This is episode 141. I'm your host, Ross Bartachek, and joining me tonight is our good friend, Lars Underbaki. He's a co-host, and we got some tech support from Nicholas Ryder helping us out there too. So we're back, and we're live. Lars, how you been?
Just living the dream, man. Another week. Lots of exciting stuff going on in the wrestling world in Iowa.
Yeah, there's a lot of media days going on. Iowa State, you and I had their media day already. Iowa's got their media day coming up tomorrow. Yeah,
You heading out there?
I don't think I'm making it out to Mount Vernon, but we might have somebody head out, and there's some National Wrestling Coaches Association rankings came out. So yeah, we got a lot to get to. First, I think, if we start chronologically, we can kind of talk about some of these Iowa wrestling commits that just kind of came down the pipeline. There was one end of last week, a Montana state champion, Leif Schroeder, committed. Do you know anything about him and kind of your thoughts on the first commitment of the Hawkeyes?
I really didn't know a whole lot about him, We released the article about who was all coming to town, read up a little bit on him, but, seems like a really solid recruit. Iowa's had, really good luck going out to Montana, obviously. But, I really have never really watched a whole lot of him. I'm not sure what you know.
Outside of he's 3-time state champ, he's projecting in the middleweights, I think, like 157, it kind of sounds like. I think he might have been with Big Game Wrestling Club for just a little bit, which was that's run by Dylan Carew. I don't think he's with that club now, even though it's still in existence in Montana too. But so I don't really know a whole lot about him. He was a Greco AA when he was a cadet, but outside of that, I don't think he's been to a lot of national tournaments lately. So. Maybe he's a little bit of an under-the-radar recruit. Obviously, Iowa's had some pretty good success with Montana guys, so I can think of another Montana dude having some success at Iowa State. So, maybe these under-the-radar Montana guys, these Big Sky country, can pull something off. Then there was another commit, and this one probably a little bit bigger of a headline. What is it? Brettley Reyna of Florida. You probably know something about him, right?
Yeah, I know a little bit more about Reyna. He's been a guy kind of on everybody's radar. It seemed like he was always rated a little low. He's one of those South Dade, Florida guys, and they've really produced a ton of good guys. I know Florida's not known for wrestling, but that's always been a good school. Obviously, that's where Lugo came from, different guys. And he's got, 3-time state champ, does a lot of good stuff, and then he really, really solidified his name by going out and winning Super 32 this year. So I think it's a really good pickup. I don't even know where else he was all looking before that, but I think, Iowa kind of jumped in there when he won Super 32. He visited, and, really if they get, Ayala and Rathje, I feel like they'd have every single guy that visited on the 19th. Are those the only two they're missing?
There's another kid from Colorado, Cam Lucero.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
But, they're pretty close to clean sweeping it.
I guess Patty Gallagher was there, wasn't he? But
Patty
it just
Gallagher,
seems like they're
Ryan Sokol.
now. They got Henson. You go out to Montana, you go to Florida. You're just getting guys from all over the place right now. And kind of fun to see. Everybody was talking about, Oklahoma State and Wisconsin cleaning up. UNI's got some recruits lately. Iowa now getting some recruits, so it's been fun. Things are picking up before the season starts, so it'll be interesting to see how they finish these classes off and everything.
Yeah, and Reina's a guy that projects out 149, might grow into a 57, kind of depends, but I think a lot of people are probably pegging him to be a Lugo type replacement. So if you kind of look at their two recent commits, they got Reina, Schroeder, that 49-57 mold. They're looking at Ratchie. They're recruiting Ratchie pretty hard for 49. Again, he might be a 57 growth. Kind of depends on what his body does. So it kind of looks like they've identified quite a few bodies there Ryan Sokol was a 141, 149 recruit. Between Henson, Ratchie, Reina, Schroeder, kind of really seems like they're trying to fill that hole, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and they got, Kobe Seabrook last year from in-state who, beat Henson last year at Independence. He's got some really good wins. Seabrook was a guy that, blasted on everybody's radar last year too. So, yeah, it just seems like they're really, really loading up through those weights. It seems over the last couple classes with Kennedy and Assad and some of those guys, they were loading up 74, 84. Obviously, they've always had the lightweights. So you got to think heavyweight, maybe 97. Got to be some of the next weights on the radar, but seem to be just building all kinds of depth through the middle.
Yeah, and I think that's something that they're trying to build. I mean, they're building a lot of depth that they've always been. They've had depth, but they haven't had like as high level depth. Now they're bringing in Reina, and they're going to have Reina, Henson, and if they get Ratchie, we're talking about guys that are top 50, top 30 recruits that are, battling for one spot rather than, bringing in one marquee guy and maybe you got a couple top 100s battling for that spot. So it'll be really interesting to see how their lineup shakes out, especially if they land all the guys from that big visit weekend. We do know that Ratchie and Ayala they're pretty big on Iowa State. I think they got some interest from you and I mutually, and then they were both at North Carolina this last weekend. It's pretty cool to see those two sharing posts from that. So, do you think, do you have any guesses on where they're the big two names in Iowa. Do you have any guesses on where they end up?
Oof, that's tough. I don't know. My gut tells me Ayala ends up in Iowa City. And for some reason, I think Ratchie ends up at Iowa State. Those are just kind of my guesses. But I think a lot can change. I think, basically every school in the country, I think, would love to have Ayala at this point. So it'll be kind of interesting. I don't know if money comes into play, partners, he's worked with Colin Shriver a lot, stuff like that. I don't know if that comes into play. There's been talk of Ratchie and Ayala wanting to go somewhere together. I don't know. With all these guys coming to Iowa City, it makes you wonder what's going through Caleb's head as far as so much depth there. I know he's not scared of the depth, but it makes you wonder how much money they're willing to spend in those weights. And if they've already given these guys all scholarships, do they have the money to compete for Caleb Ratchie as well?
Yeah, I think you could ask me every week, maybe every other day, and I might have a different answer. And that's probably the nature of recruiting, right? These kids, they don't know either. Otherwise, they'd already had their decision made. But I think, man, I could answer that question a different day of the week. So I'm sorry I put you on the spot.
To be totally honest, it sure sounded like Ratchie had a ton of fun out in North Carolina. I know there was some connection there. So you never know. Maybe Michigan comes into play for Ayala yet as well. I guess in my heart, I'm hoping they both stay in state. I think they both stay in state, but I don't think those schools are out of the question.
And speaking of having fun out in North Carolina, how much did Tony Ramos get the entire state of Iowa riled up when he was talking about, adding to the 2021 class? We made it pretty public who was out there. We posted photos all over our Instagram, Twitter. And, Ramos comes out with that post, and it was instant meltdown, checking, are these guys going out there? So, big play by Tony Ramos. I can't remember. I think it was a kid from Missouri I saw.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's two commits in the 2021 class, but I know there's a kid.
I messaged him right away, too. Like, what's going on? Did you get somebody from Iowa? We need to know this.
Yeah, so no, that I thought that was well played by Ramos. Got people worked up. So That's what you need, and you know what? They're threatening here, so I think you're right. I think they did have a lot of fun. So we could kind of move over. Go ahead.
No, speaking of coming into state, I don't think Jack Thomsen had committed yet last week, had he? Did we talk about Jack Thomsen going out of state?
No, that was I think that was the same day Leif Schroeder. That was a double whammy day for us.
Yeah. What do you think about that one? I think that surprised a few people. I think a lot of people thought he was just destined to go to UNI. You know, it's really close by. His brother's there. Were you? I mean, I guess I had a little heads up that South Dakota State was definitely in the mix. Were you surprised by that?
Totally. You know, both Holschlag brothers, in addition to his brother at UNI, seemed like that Union pipeline into Cedar Falls was pretty strong. He's more of a diamond in the rough kind of prospect. He's kind of coming on late. Obviously not as polished as Max was at the same time, but yeah, I mean, South Dakota State's just coming in and poaching people. You know, that's what they do. That's what Bono and Reeder did, and Cody Caldwell's, you know, letting Damian Hahn know, hey, this works pretty good for us. Let's keep it going, right?
Well, and I mean, top guys. Think about Cade DeVos last year was arguably about the best guy in that whole class. Trenari's got the pedigree. He's, you know, a big guy. I mean, Kimball was a good recruit coming in. Jack was one of our top 10 guys in our Fab 50. Yeah, I mean, just making waves. So a little bit surprising, but, you know, yeah, Bennett's only a freshman. Blockus is only a freshman. Cale Happel's on the way in. So kind of that same talk of, you know, they're building some depth. Those guys are going to be there for a long time. Was it a money thing? Was it a competition thing? I don't know. But hats off, Cody Caldwell, killing it out there, bringing in these Iowa guys. And I'm excited to see what Jack will do.
Yeah, well, you know, I can't believe he was worried about 141, because if Jack knows anything about UNI, they just kind of bulk job their guys now, right?
That's right.
That's right.
We'll get into that one.
Yeah, so, I mean, that was the first media day that happened this week, right? UNI was on Monday, Iowa State was today, so let's switch over to UNI, and I think there were, I mean, the one big news in the lineup change that was probably the most well-known was Taylor Lujan going up to 184. I feel like that there was kind of rumblings. I know Pugh kind of confirmed it on our podcast when we talked to him that was definitely happening. But there was one thing he said that, you know, Steiert was going to be at 65, and they were kind of looking at Keegan Moore 74. But apparently, Keegan Moore and Yant were kind of the guys they were looking at 74. So that's kind of changed, though. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. That was a big shock to me. I was really surprised to hear him talk about Bryce Steiert going up. Never really appeared to me to be a huge 65-pounder. I mean, he was a good 65-pounder, good size. He was never small, but I guess in my mind he would just stay there. I never really questioned that. You know, kind of makes you wonder if he'll be as effective up there. You know, he's obviously been really good at 65, but that's another jump. And I'm not sure, you know, again, Yant was talked about at 74, and now is he the front runner at 65? I don't know. You know, I got a couple other guys there. Obviously, I trust they know the lineup a lot better than I do. They have a better idea what's going on, but I think that definitely caught most everybody off guard to hear him talk about Steiert going up as well.
That was, UNI they brought in that 2015 class that was so big, and everyone was talking about them being, you know, some game changers for UNI, but one of the things they've kind of struggled with is all of them breaking through at the same time. I mean, literally, Max was an All-American as a freshman, then it was Holschlag at 97, and then Steiert was the only one of that group to make the podium. You know, so it's like they've never been able to make it all at the same time. Lars is showing off the Schwab Mob shirt right now, so I got to give him props to that. But so yeah, I'm really questioning this move, and you're right. These coaches probably have a better idea than I do, but you know, I didn't see Bryce as being a guy that was, you know, overly horsing guys at 165, and I don't think he's overly tall. So you know, he's probably going to have to deal with some length factor at 74. So I'm really interested to see how that move plays out. I feel a lot better about Lujan going up because he's got some funk ability to him that, he can kind of cope with leverage. He can make up with it. Whereas Steiert, I always viewed him as he's kind of a brawler, and it's kind of harder to brawler with bigger guys. So I think we're gonna have to see how that plays out. And now, coming into this season, I was kind of wondering, hey, what's going to happen at 57, and we'll see which one of these guys, between if Yant's good enough to beat Moore right away. But now I'm kind of like, man, what the heck's going to happen at 57 and 65?
Yeah. I think we've all kind of been high on Keaton Gertz through high school, waiting to see if maybe he's the guy that jumps in at 57. Obviously, Cade Lara was one of the guys that we had watched there. Doesn't sound like that's going to be possible. Question at 57. Now all of a sudden you create another question at 65. We'll see. It makes you wonder if Steiert certifies at 65. See how 74 goes. Kind of figure that out and play it by ear throughout the year. I don't know, but I think there's a question there. Whichever way he doesn't go.
Yeah. That'll be something to watch. I mean, they wrestle Nebraska right away, so
right away. Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty big test. We'll get some.
Yeah, I think November 23rd we get Iowa State and Nebraska at UNI. I think on the same day. So
yeah, we need to find a photog for one of the other. Well, maybe I suppose Nickel. I don't know what Nickel do because he's usually covering the duel, so he's not shooting it. So I don't know what we're gonna do because we need photos because they're gonna be great duels. But
yeah. And then you and I got a hole at 97 for a while too.
Yeah, so that's the other thing is last year they didn't really come right out and say that Holschlag was going to miss the whole season, and then it's, hey, by the way, Holschlag is going to miss the whole season. We find out pretty early this summer, hey, he got a medical red shirt. He's only a junior. That's good news. He's cleared. And now it sounds like he's not going to be back. And I don't know, are we waiting till the Big 12s to see him, or what's the deal?
Well, and I don't know. Yeah, so they've talked about Tyrell Gordon. Obviously did a good job stepping in last year as a freshman, had a real solid year. The talk all along's been, now it's time to redshirt him. That's why they used him last year. They could redshirt him this year, give him that year to grow. He's the only other 97-pounder on the roster at the moment. Keegan Moore is at 84, but we just talked about him possibly going to 74, so he's obviously not even that big. Bryce Esmoil came in kind of at that weight, but they've been kind of bulking him up. He wrestled heavyweight last year. I know he's been looking more at heavyweight this year with some other stuff. So do you send Moore out there at 97 undersized? Do you forfeit? Do you just not send anybody out against a team like Nebraska? And, does that throw your whole chances at a duel? Which, obviously, duels aren't the key to anything, but I know they're going to want to win it. Do you waste, or not waste, but do you just use Tyrell? And then what happens when Holschlag does come back and you just burnt, Gordon's year? That just throws a huge monkey wrench into everything.
Yeah, I don't really get it, and I don't really know what's going on. Kind of seems like I guess I don't even know how his recovery to say when was he cleared to start practicing, but yeah, they build a lot of their fan experience on those duels in West Gym. So it'd be crazy if they forfeit one of the 10 weights. You're giving your opponent free 6 points. And UNI's got a really competitive schedule this year, so that's a pretty big handicap to be handing your opponent there. So I don't know what to make of it. I think I don't know. I don't know how somebody that, regardless of when he had surgery and when he was cleared, I don't know how he can be out as late as Schwab said, and maybe he was just kind of saying that in jest, say Big 12. So at least that's what I'm hoping, that we see him. And maybe they do, they were hopeful to have him back right away, and they do have to forfeit against Nebraska, and that'll be the nature of the beast. But if it means he comes back in December, good to go, that's probably the best route. But it definitely wasn't something I was expecting to hear. One thing we were expecting, Lars, was these UNI freshmen coming in to push for a spot. So, I mean, Schwab highlighted some of those guys. What were your takes on that?
Yeah, for sure. I think we've all been waiting for this class to come in. We've talked about at length all these guys that they got. And I'm super excited. I know Michael Blockus gets a ton of the attention, and rightfully so. I think, the showing he had in Midlands last year really put him on the map for a lot of people. Maybe didn't know as much about him coming out of high school for whatever reason. But, I look for him to probably be the 41-pounder. But then you've got a couple of, interesting battles below him. Biscaglia, another guy that had a huge Midlands, just incredibly tough kid, really stingy. And to me, almost the polar opposite of the guy that you've had there. So I hope they do a wrestle-off. I don't remember them really doing, public wrestle-offs in the past, but to see Biscaglia and Schwarm in a wrestle-off, I think would be a blast. Just that clash in styles. You got Drew Bennett at 33, guy who's just had tons of wins throughout his career, has wrestled a ton of matches, so he's in that mix. And then you still got guys like Tristan Lara, Bryce Hesmoil, some of those guys waiting in the wings as well that, probably won't make the lineup yet. Tyrell Gordon, we don't know what's going to happen with him, but, those first three I think are definitely interesting ones. And, I kind of expect Bennett to win 33, Blockus to win 41, and I sure wouldn't bet against Biscaglia at 25.
Yeah, I think all three can. I mean, Schwab's saying they can push for a lineup spot. I think probably the bigger question is making sure Drew Bennett's healthy. I don't know. I feel like he had something to come back from. So, I mean, Scud Larzik might be the guy for the first month or two based on that alone. But I'm really excited to see what he can do. He's a guy that, he just wrestles tough as nails. And like you said, Blockus probably gets the lion's share of the praise, but the Biscaglia, Bennett, Blockus, starting out with 3 Bs. The bad boys, I don't know what they'll call them, but got to think of something catchy if those three all start. Yeah, it's an exciting time to see some young guys take over that lineup. So were there any other takeaways that I missed from UNI's Media Day?
Not too much. We talked a little bit about guys battling even at 57. And one of the things that stuck out a little bit to me was, what did he say about Gertz? He was one of the most dynamic guys in the room or something like that. So I thought that was a really good sign for Keaton. He sat out pretty much all year last year with that, was it elbow injury, stuff like that. So, maybe he's giving him a little praise towards him being the guy at 57. We'll see. But be interesting to see if Gertz can get in there as well. And again, we'll have, Patton and Schoenfelder or whatever at 65. So there'll be some interesting battles there to fill the lineup for sure. Yeah,
and I totally forgot until right now that Gertz got a medical red shirt for last year too. So that's pretty big. So does that make him, is that red shirt freshman now? Is that what he is technically classified?
I think so. Technically, if he got the medical already, I think he would still be a freshman.
Oh my goodness! So there could be quite a few freshmen. I mean, dang near half the lineup could turn over to freshmen here. So it'll be interesting. We kind of thought this would probably be one of UNI's deeper squads. There's some question marks now in those upper weights, but they got that early test versus Nebraska. I'm trying to think of their other duels kind of starting out. They always have that UNI Open early on in December. They usually send some of their younger guys to Harold Nichols Open, so I doubt they send their full squad to that with them.
They've got Northwestern right away too, I think. So then Cliff Keen and UNI Open. I mean, they get right into it. So
there are a lot of good tests to see where if there's a new guy coming in, they can make a name for themselves right away. So
yeah, and I'll be interested if we talk about Blockus, depending on, I don't know, Northwestern. I've heard Yaya Thomas might be going to 49, 41. I'm not sure, but I mean, he's got a chance to see some guys at the Nichols. He could see Yaya, and he could see Chad Redd right out of the gate, basically the first 2 weeks of the year. So we might know a lot about Mike Blockus' chances right off the bat.
Midlands semifinalist, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we're obviously Blockus homers, so there's no hiding that. Be interesting to see what he can do. And I think we know what we think he can do, but be interesting to see him prove it, I guess. I think that's what I got for you and I. So do you kind of want to move on to, I mean, Iowa State had some news prior to Media Day. There's a big old bombshell that dropped that Anthony Echemendia, the Cuban international wrestler, wrestled for Sunnyside High School in Arizona. So he was, for folks that don't know, he grew up in Cuba, defected, wrestled his senior year at Sunnyside, won Fargo in freestyle Greco, and everyone's just like, man, this guy came out of nowhere. Who is he? And then he commits to Iowa State in September, just before Who's Number One. Lars and I go to Who's Number One and watch this dude just put on a gymnastics clinic in Carver, and then he goes out and dominates a very talented Josh Saunders at Who's Number One. And everyone's like, holy crap, Iowa State's getting this huge prospect until, what was that, Sunday? He posts that he had a very good official visit at Ohio State. So catch us up on what happened since Who's Number One till now.
I wish I knew, man. This is crazy. Part of me wonders with his whole history you just went through, coming from Cuba, even watching him be interviewed on the mat at Who's Number One. He's got a translator. There was questions whether he could get into school, and he kind of played some of that off of, I didn't know the whole deal of recruiting, things like that. I'm really against kids decommitting. I know they're kids. I know there's different things, but I think part of the problem is with all this earlier recruiting and everything going on that sometimes kids just commit too soon. I'd rather see them wait until they're, really solid. Obviously, this is a different situation. This kid's already out of high school. I mean, there was talk he was going to step in at 41 for Iowa State this year.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not like he committed too early. So what happened? Is it really a matter of he didn't know what was going on? Is it something happened with Iowa State? Is it these other schools came in and whatever? I don't know what happened, but I know he's talked about Penn State. At one point he talked about Iowa. He visited Ohio State. I mean, everybody wants this guy. He's an all-world talent. We saw it at Who's Number One. We talked about it last week. It just makes you wonder what happened. Did something happen with Iowa State, or is it more than that?
And I think the biggest question, well, not the biggest, but one of the big questions is, what the heck did he sign?
Right.
The big thing when he announced, the Sunnyside, Arizona high school wrestling account tweeted, he's in an assembly in front of a packed gym, and he's signing a letter, and, I know one of the tweets from the Sunnyside account was, we placed a wrestler now at Penn State. We got one committed to Iowa, and we just had somebody signed to Iowa State. Here they are. They're really pumping it up. And then we find out, he's taken an official visit to Ohio State. And the first thing that comes to mind is, so does that mean NCAA infraction by Ohio State? Because if you signed a national letter of intent, you're now breaking some rules to be recruiting a guy, especially inviting him on an official visit. So that's kind of one of the things that comes to mind. But if, talking to him, he says he's not committed. And, listening to Flow Wrestling Radio Live today, they're talking about other schools are interested in him and other schools want him to get him to visit. So at this point, I got to think it wasn't an NLI, because if it was, there can't be all these schools contacting me. Or by now, Iowa State's released him.
Right. Well, and Jake Torkelson, who was at Media Day for us today, said that they did confirm that it was just a financial aid form, basically, is what he signed. There was no actual letter of intent. I know that was definitely construed in a weird way, because they sure made it sound like he had signed a letter of intent. It looked like that on Twitter. I know there was questions.
Were reporting it. Newspapers are the OG journalist.
Right, and I know there's questions of, it's not signing day yet, but at the same time, again, he's graduated. He's out of high school. What's the rules for a kid once the season's already, or the college year's already started? He's already are there rules to signing? How often does that ever happen, especially at a D1 level where some kid's not going to wrestle? not going anywhere yet. The school year's already started, and all of a sudden he's signing a letter of intent. Like, this whole thing is just odd.
There is a timeline. I feel like there's a cutoff because there's, like last year we saw those guys that took a gap year, they gray shirted, went to the OTC. They still signed their NLI for this season. They signed at the same time recruits do in November. So there's got to be some cutoff. I don't know when it is exactly. So, I don't really know if I can comment on when that happens. But it's just, I don't know. It like Jake said, okay, so it was a financial agreement or whatever. So not an NLI. So at least it was clean recruiting. But it just, I have to wonder if the reason Iowa State was, or whoever was rumbling that Echemendia was going to go there and start second semester, it was because we need to get this guy on campus and get him into our lineup so that he's ours.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if that was like, we just need to get him here, and then he's a Cyclone. But
right.
Oh, craziness. Moving then to media day, kind of seemed like Dresser had some positive thoughts to say about his team's progression from the previous year. But were there any, key takeaways that you kind of want to talk about right up front?
I didn't think there was a whole lot to it. I think, for the most part, we know what the lineup's going to end up being. Maybe there's a question at 97. You got two freshmen there with Dugan and Shapiro. I'm interested to see. Logan Schumacher's been wrestling well. He was one of those names that kind of flew under the radar, but he beat some guys earlier last week. I'm interested to see how much he can push Chase Straw. I think there's questions of Straw. He was ended up being a Big 12 champ at 57 last year. He's coming up a weight. So that one's kind of interesting. Other than that, I feel like that lineup's pretty well set. No matter what happens with some of these younger guys, like Broderson's going to redshirt. There's no reason to wrestle him, guys like that. So the only other question is, how soon was Gomez going to get down to 33? We talked about that a little bit last week. He's talking about Cliff Keen. He's planning on being there. Did you watch the interview with him today?
Yeah.
He said he got to 165 or 170 this summer.
Yeah, the boy can eat.
And then Dresser in his interview said he likes tacos and he likes a lot of cheese on his tacos. That was his explanation.
Right? So, I guess, Gomez had some fun. He binged a little bit, and now he's kind of having to work it off, right?
I guess that's some weight to pull. We were making fun of a couple of the guys at Night of Conflict, high school kids who bulked up a little bit. But I don't even think any of them were that bad. That's a big cut. Think about that. You're going from almost 170 to 133 in a matter of a couple months.
Yeah, it'll be. Is he actually making certified 141 for the Cardinal and Gold wrestle-offs? That's what I want to know.
I guess I'm not sure if it's scratch or not, but I would assume they at least have to make some sort of a weight allowance for it. We'll see. But then he's talking Cliff Keen, which is really, less than a month away. He's going to be all the way down at 33 is the plan. So obviously that makes Iowa State's lineup that much better. Right. I would assume we'll see maybe Todd Small or somebody at 33 for the time being. It'll be interesting to see if Gomez wrestles those first few duels at 41, if Parker does, how they're going to play that out. Because, again, they wrestle Iowa, the 23rd, that Sunday, 23rd, 24th. One of those guys is going to sit then, and you're going to wrestle Small at 33. Obviously, it's interesting, too, because there's still questions of Iowa's 33-41 situation. So I think there's a lot of variables there. It'd be kind of interesting to see what lineups come out for that duel early in the year.
I got to assume it's Todd Small, and I suppose Gomez probably gives you the more big points factor. He can pancake you from just about anywhere, whereas Parker's probably going to wrestle a tactical match especially with somebody like Max Murin. And if it was DeSanto,
at 41.
I was gonna say, if it's DeSanto at 41, then you got two guys that are like, they're probably 33 pounders wrestling 41. So why not let them loose, right? So
right.
That's I think that's crazy he got up that high, pulling weight. Jesus. Dude likes his tacos.
He likes his tacos. That was the big takeaway for me. Again, I think a lot of that lineup's pretty straightforward. It's just a matter of guys taking jumps. Mackel won a couple matches at Nationals last year. What's his progression? Is he on the stand this year? Gannon Gremmel's a guy that we've talked about for years. He was a Fargo champ early on. He was a state runner-up at 220 as a freshman, which is unheard of. He's always been good. Dresser talked about today. He's been better in the room. Can he be consistently good every day in the room? So I think Gremmel's a guy who's got an opportunity to make a big jump. That's a tough weight. But if he can live up to, what we know he can do, Marcus Coleman's a guy that came in with a ton of accolades. So there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of talent in that lineup, but what's that next step? What's that progression for these guys? I think what you got with Deegan and Gomez, David Carr, these guys should be on the stand. We know where they're at, but Colbray could place high, and then you got, Coleman, Gremmel, Mackel, those kind of guys, Parker. They're capable of doing a lot. Are they going to step up and do it this year?
Yeah, I think you're looking for what Iowa State's looking for is, he kind of told them what he said in his press conferences, if you guys want to be a top 15, top 20 team, you just you gotta have that mentality, and you guys can do it. And they did. Last year they had a huge leap forward, and Dresser won Coach of the Year. And I think what they're looking for is pretty much they just need all those guys that didn't, even Dagan, who was an All-American, they need you to win one more match than you did the year before at the national tournament. So for Colbray, who was a round of 12 guy, we need you to win one more. We need you to be on the podium. There's a lot of guys that only won one match and weren't winning two matches. Just every little thing to, dip, dive, duck, and dodge, get in there you want to be a top 10 team. Pretty much everybody needs to win one more match to bring the whole, the tide rises the boat, right? So,
yeah. We know David Carr's accolades, but again, watching him today, have you seen a more well-spoken, great, just representative of a program than that kid?
Super charismatic.
He's so young, but he's so charismatic, and he's so well-spoken and so thoughtful. And, we talked about it at Who's Number One of him with the recruits, with the wrestlers, with the coaches. Everybody that saw him wanted to talk to him. There's just something about him. He's just like a natural born leader. I know he's only a freshman, but I just feel like he's the kind of kid that just elevates that room and that program just being there.
Yeah, and he's kind of got one of those infectious smiles. He's always kind of smiling, and you see him, you're he's always having fun. That's the vibe we got from him, seeing him, like I said, at Who's Number One, and Dresser, when he was talking about him today, saying he was great. He's great with recruits and donors and alumni. You can see it, and we definitely saw that with Facundo. I think Alex posted on something that they're brothers for life, and you can see that they got a pretty tight bond. So yeah, David Carr is going to be a pretty big pillar for the program, not just on the mat. I think going forward it's pretty obvious. Another guy that Jake Torque got to talk to there at Iowa State was Aiden Reeves. Pretty good to hear that he's back on the mat. He's been cleared for a month now, and he's thinking about competing right away at the Harold Nichols. So that's pretty cool to have Aiden back in the lineup. It's been a long time since we've been able to see him wrestle live.
Yeah, for sure. He was at Who's Number One too. I got a good chance to talk to him for a while there where you were down doing interviews. He says he's doing great, says he feels good. He got a little bit bigger this summer. He was lifting, doing some other stuff as well. He's working his way back down to 25. His plan is really to stay at 25. He thinks he can be a career guy there, which is huge. You don't find those very often, especially with that kind of talent. So hopefully he's healthy, ready to go. Hopefully see him at Nichols. I'm hoping we'll get him at Grandview. We'll be doing the video at Grandview and stuff like that. I know a bunch of us will be there, so it'd be fun to see some of these young guys from all these schools. But, I'm excited to watch Aiden. Obviously, he's been a guy that we've followed all the way through high school, and I expect big things.
Yeah, so the next big thing for Iowa State, though, will be their Cardinal and Gold duel. There's pretty much, I don't know, what do you say, two contested matches probably if you're looking at that line. Well, Parker Gomez will be a super match. We'll see what's going on at 65, and then 97, that's the big one to watch. And the bad part is that probably doesn't even decide it. There's probably going to be a couple more opens and trade-in starts to see, who goes. And it'll be interesting to see who they pick for Cliff Keen, whether it be, Joel or Francis Dugan. So any other thoughts on Iowa State? Did I miss anything?
No, I don't really think so. And the funny thing with Dugan and Shapiro's would be kind of interesting. Shapiro started low in weight, and we talked about grow, and was kind of came in more of almost an 84 pounder that just kind of steadily growing. And Dugan's a guy who was wrestling 220 and was wrestling some matches at heavyweight, stuff like that in high school, and he's coming down. So I'll be interested to see how big Shapiro looks next to him as well. You get to college, these are solid big guys. So is he truly big enough to compete with those top guys at 97, just even on a size and a strength plane?
Joel has never had trouble putting on weight since after his sophomore year. So that dude just lifts, I think. Him and Connor Corbin they just work out, I think. A couple of Valley boys. So, all right. Well, that's you and I and Iowa State's Media Day. Iowa's obviously got theirs at Kroll Farms. That's kind of interesting. I kind of heard a rumor that Nicholas Ryder is toying with the idea of going, but I don't think we have firm confirmation that that'll be happening. I doubt it. He hates Iowa. He's too much of a Schwab boy. But so we'll be interested to see what kind of comments come out of there. Obviously, everyone's going to be asking questions about Teasdale, DeSanto, what's going on there. Is there any other... What are the other big storylines we're looking at Iowa?
I think really those are the big ones. I'm sure there's going to be some questions about, Nelson Brands, what weight's he kind of sitting at? Is he going to challenge anybody? You've got Young, who's coming into the year basically ranked, second in the most polls at 57. You got Marinelli, you got Kemmerer. There's four, in my mind, All-Americans for three spots there. So, where does that shake out? Where's Nelson trying to get in the lineup at? If we do see Russell-Offs, what weight is he going? I think that'll be a question, but obviously 33-41's the big kicker for Iowa right now. I think the rest of the lineup's pretty straightforward. Is it Teasdale, DeSanto, Mirren? Who's the odd man out? What weight? Is DeSanto growing into a 41 pounder? Does he start the year at 33? I think obviously that's going to be the center of everybody's mind right now.
Yeah, and maybe is Vince Turk going up to 49? Because that's where they listed him on the roster. There's been a lot of talk that he's been getting big. Can't remember, did he wrestle up at 70 kilograms for U23s at Akron?
Was it? I don't remember. Was it 70? Could be.
I can't remember. I thought he got big, and it was holy crap. And, it's probably just because there's no tweener weight between, he probably can't get below 65. And if he's bigger than 143, if he's a 49-pounder, 70 might have been his only option. But I think that's something interesting to watch. Turk's a 2-year starter. I know Lugo was an All-American, but, Turk's stingy, man. So that'll be something I'm kind of wondering to know if that's going to be a battle. Will there be wrestle-offs? I hope that question gets answered. Fans usually pack it, so it's fun to be there. That one's never streamed, but it's always just a good environment to be in.
And really, there's great depth there too. So even some of the other wrestle-offs could be fun. And you're not even talking about Paul Glenn at 33. You got Happel in the mix. There's just so many good bodies in there that I really hope they do wrestle-offs. I hope they all do. Obviously, Iowa State's are coming up here for the finals, but I'm really hoping UNI does something. I think there'll be some interesting ones there. I'd like to see Iowa go back to doing them as well. So we'll see. But I think, obviously, 33-41 is going to be the question everybody has right now for Iowa.
And I suppose the storyline everybody will be painting will be the team race probably. It'll be more focused on that. Everyone's talking about this is the team that can challenge for a title, first title potentially in a decade. I think the wrestling coaches put out their poll today, and Iowa was number 2 with 2 first-place votes.
Yeah.
So that's where they're starting. I think that's pretty much where everyone had them pegged, so no real surprises there. There was a surprise in a different National Wrestling Coaches poll. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Was it a surprise though? I mean, it's maybe a first. It's a little bit of a surprise, but a lot of excitement brewing up there in Dubuque.
I was not surprised when they were named the American Rivers Conference preseason favorite, but I mean, I didn't expect them to be number 1 in the national poll. But that let the cat's out of the bag that Loras has nabbed the runner-ups of Division III behind Augsburg, but they're listed as number 1 coming into the season.
Yeah, I mean, and part of it's just depth. I mean, they obviously have Guy Patrone, Brandon Murray and Clint Lembeck. I think those guys are all top 2 guys, top 3 guys, but just depth. Loras has just been recruiting like crazy. We've talked about, 2 years ago, all of a sudden they just went on a tear where it felt like for 3 weeks all we were doing was writing articles about this kid going to Loras, this kid going to Loras. I mean, they've just been building and building and building. So now all those guys are starting to come through. Your Bryce Eversons and Eddie Smith, I mean, Krakow, they've just got all these guys lining up. So, I mean, it's crazy to think. I mean, when I was young, even 10 years ago, where was Loras? I mean, was Loras even a thought in your mind when it came to D3 wrestling? Like, they had a program, but I mean, they were lucky to get 2-3 guys to nationals, it seemed like. And now they have 6-7 guys in the top 10. It's testament to TJ Miller and Kittleson. I mean, they're just killing it up there. It'll be interesting. I hope them and Wartburg battle it right out to the end. I hope, those are your teams. Coe's going to be in that mix. Coe's got a good team this year, but it's just exciting to see somebody different. We're so used to seeing Augsburg, Wartburg, a few other teams jump in, but having Loras in that mix as well is exciting for us. It's another, really fun team to cover. We've built some of those connections with those coaches as well. So I'm excited. I think it's fun to see them there, and I hope they can go out there and prove it.
It's crazy. I mean, especially, and I'm going to probably forget somebody, and that's mainly the fault of Kittleson and Miller for recruiting so many guys that you can't even keep them all straight unless you're with them every day, I feel like. But, they don't have anybody ranked at heavyweight, but they do have Wyatt Wright coming in from Nebraska, former top 100 recruit. I mean, you don't find too many of those in Division III. Of course, I say that, and you see the number 1 heavyweight is Darius Jones, who was a former top 100 recruit that went to UNI and now is Augustana. But that's besides the point. You do get, you don't find those, and when they do come, they can make a huge impact. So Loras has got some guys that aren't ranked preseason that can maybe make a splash. There's also a couple other Iowa boys wanted to point out. Braden Burt at 65 now, and then Ben Saracen at 84 there in Chicago. So a couple Iowa boys in the rankings too. Always good to see some potential All-Americans from our former prep standouts. But I think it's going to be a really fun season. Lars, I don't know if you know this, but I was like 1 the last time that Wartburg wasn't the American Rivers Conference or Iowa Conference champion. I'm kind of old now. It's
crazy. I mean, they've I don't know. You can't say enough things about Wartburg, and obviously, TJ came out of that program. He learned from his father. He learned, how to build that program. But I mean, it's happened fast. I mean, they came in and they hit the ground running, and to see them number 1 this quick is something really cool. And hats off to them. And we'll let them go out and prove it on the mat, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Wartburg. We talk a lot about what Loras has done recently, but the strength of Wartburg is they always find somebody that you didn't know about just come out of nowhere, and then they got Brock Rathbun, who's sitting down there at number 5 at 141, but he's a former national champ. So, I mean, they got guys that got some upward potential in their lineup too. So, yeah, that'll be a fun Division III battle to watch in our backyard here, man. We got a lot of good Division III wrestling here in the state of Iowa. We got a lot of good teams that are, we got Co also ranked in the top 10 nationally.
We got to get somebody if get some boots on the ground for that Loras Warburg duel. That's got to be just fire there. We got to figure that one out.
To send Alex Williamson. We just won't let her interview anybody. All right, so that was the preseason polls that came out. If Division II came out and I didn't see it, sorry about that, Heath Grimm in Upper Iowa, but we'll look for that. We wanted to talk about the season pass that's coming up this season. Obviously, that's our streaming package we got through Track Wrestling. There's some pretty big tournaments, usually some duels that end up getting featured that aren't listed in our in our schedule of events that we always list out. But we do have a couple big key events. I don't know if you want to talk about a couple that you're excited about, Lars.
Well, I think right off the bat, Grandview Open, start the year, the 16th? That's always a fun event. There's just unreal amounts of, Iowa kids, former Iowa high school wrestlers. Just so many guys that you're familiar with that we've covered on the site. I think that's always exciting. You can see these young guys that are coming up. I know like last year we got to watch, Alex Thomsen and some of these younger guys that we were always excited about. Nebraska's coming in. I think Missouri usually brings some guys in. Then you get, all your Grandview guys and some of those. So just always a crazy good event. One of the best opens that I go to any year. And then Council Bluffs Classic. We got that, 2 weeks later. That's kind of or a few weeks later, but I think that's December 9th and 10th. And again, we're kicking off the high school season with a bang. That's a huge, huge tournament. And I know we'll have a few guys out there covering as well. So I think right away we're starting college and high school with just unbelievable events, and we're going to hit the ground running.
Yeah, at the Grandview Open, I'm trying to remember this fourth year that
Yeah, it might be. Yeah.
I want to say fourth year because Alex Marinelli's true freshman year was the first year that we were there, and that was blowing up. That was the talk because everybody was wondering if he was going to wrestle that year, and he had a chance to run into who did you and I have at 65 at that time? It was Cooper Moore. He didn't end up wrestling, I don't think. But, everyone was like, man, if Marinelli can wrestle Cooper Moore, we'll know right away if this guy's good enough to go right now. And so, you see a lot of even if they end up redshirting, like you said, you see a lot of the future talent that's going to be, mowing some people down. And see guys like Michael Blockus, before they go wrestle in the Midland semifinals as a true freshman. So the season pass is a $65 purchase on Track Wrestling. You get live streaming of the tournament. Usually there's the on-demand archives for you there too. There's only a few exceptions where that's usually not happening, like maybe a high school duel that gets added on late. But if you bought the season pass now, for example, you could go out and watch that Night of Conflict event we talked about a couple weeks ago. You can watch Iron Elite Fall Nationals. That's on demand already. Or we do offer pay-per-view for the events, but, just get that season pass and it'll pay for itself. If you get to see Grandview Open, Council Bluffs, usually CIMLs. Ed Winger, Jack Mendenhall. We've had a lot of big tournaments. Solon, I know you've gone out to and covered for it. So there's a lot of good tournaments. Get your money's worth pretty quick.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, just a few of those off the top. You get CIML, Council Bluffs Classic, Grandview. You're going to spend more than that on tickets and traveling and everything else. So if you can't make it, there's no reason to not watch them. Same thing, Council Bluffs Classic. What do we get? You usually got Fort Dodge. You got Underwood, who's going to be unreal this year. Waukees, one of the teams being talked about at the top of the state. There's just always a ton of talent out there. yeah, Iowa City West, who's going to have some really good kids. Nebraska, you got like Creighton Prep and Kearney and Millard. And I mean, there's just always Scott Catholic, Gardner Egerton, I think comes up from Kansas. I mean, it's just loaded. Apple Valley. So these are just unbelievable. What's that?
I was going to say, and it starts on a Friday. So you're probably working. Tournament. You might as well buy it so you can watch it before you get out there on Saturday because a lot of people work. So that's what I got for the season pass. I don't know if there's, basically the season is here, Lars. We got...
Yeah, so coaches, I think next week you can probably start expecting to start seeing some emails about rankings. It's about that time. I think the 18th, the season kicks off. And really, we want to have rankings out pretty shortly thereafter. We want to have them out in November here. So this weekend's November. I think we'll be starting to send out some rankings emails, work on 1A, 2A, 3A. There's talk. I think we might try to do some all-class rankings this year. Maybe rank, say, the top 5 guys at each weight, regardless of class. We talked a little bit about ideas for war at West Gym. I think that gets some debate going right away. Can that be used in seating criteria, maybe, things like that. So those should be pretty interesting as well.
For sure. So for looking around the Division I landscape, you got, Iowa's just got their media day. Probably, I don't think they got anything going on. UNI's inactive until their duel with Nebraska, but you got the Cardinal Gold and Ames, that duel, wrestle-offs essentially. So go check that out. Hit up our man Cam Kramer. He's probably going to be shooting photos, doing some amazing work. I think
Torkelson might be there doing results as well.
Torkelson will be there. He's our Iowa State boy. Clarion Open, that's going on, and the relevance there is obviously Wyatt Henson, that 2021 recruit we talked about earlier. He's a junior in high school, and he's like, hey, I'm going to go wrestle some college kids, so that's pretty bananas at 133. And he said he's not going in the freshman division, so that's another thing that's like, holy crap. He's going after it. Not usually something you see, so we'll probably be back to talk about that. Other than that, that's all I got. What do you got?
The only other thing was, preseason nationals. Not a lot of the maybe top high schoolers went. There were definitely some quality kids. I know we've talked about like Brandon O'Brien. He goes out, wins another title. Josh Weiss from Cedar Rapids Kennedy just signed with Northern Illinois. He goes out and wins preseason title. Jessaroga. We've talked about Nathan Jessaroga a lot. He went out and did it. I think really the only question with him is how big is he going to be? He won it at 100. He's going to be wrestling 106 now, but I thought those were all great. But I did want to pick your brain a little bit about here, and I know we've talked about it a little bit. One of the things that stood out to me, and not to pick on the kid, not to pick on the dad, we like these guys, but Daniel Max Magnana, his dad tweeted his 51st national title, which first thought is, man, that's crazy impressive. But this kid's in 8th grade, and you're telling me there's been over 50 national tournaments that you can wrestle in before 8th grade. What's that tell you about youth wrestling right now? Like, how many tournaments can come out there and just say that they're nationals?
Is there a criteria? Does USA Wrestling have to sanction it? Or I'd be curious because, what qualifies as nationals? I have no idea.
I think next year we do Night of Conflict Nationals. Why not?
Exactly. I'm aware of Fargo and pretty much USA Wrestling's nationals, and that's about it.
Well, you got Corn Cob Nationals, you got Iron Elite Nationals, just in the state of Iowa, there's all these tournaments, like preseason nationals, postseason nationals, It's wild. There just seems like it's more and more, like everybody's trying to hype their tournaments, and I get it. And you're getting good crowds. Yeah, Adidas Nationals. But what are we constituting as a national tournament? Like,
so here's the other thing I'll say, because you're right. I'm aware of these tournaments you say, but there's not very many times that I'm going to pull out that, I can only think of like maybe No, I can't think of any time I've written out like, hey, this guy was a Corn Cob Nationals champ, and somebody knew what that meant. You know, like if you're writing up who this kid is, and whether it be for a preview or maybe he committed, nobody's gonna know that he's a Corn Cob National champ. So it's probably not going to be referenced. More power to you for wrestling it. I just don't think you're a national champion for winning a tournament that maybe kids from 4 different states were at, 5 different. I mean, is there a state qualifying? You have to have so many states there to be a nationals, or is that the criteria? I'd be really interested, because if there's only 3 states there and you're a national champ, you're more likely to be like a regional champ.
Right.
So.
And we talk about like the Fab 50, and really the only things I consider outside of the state are Fargo, preseason and postseason nationals that are USA Wrestling folk style national tournaments, and that's it. I don't count any of those other Corn Cobs, any of those. I'm not looking at their Tulsa results when they were kids. I'm not looking at any of that stuff. Tulsa's a little bit different animal. Obviously, that's a younger generation. But yeah, I just feel like anytime, if you invite anybody from another state, can you call it a national tournament? Independence is inviting kids from Minnesota, Illinois, and Missouri. Can we call that Independence Nationals this year?
When they talk about Reno Worlds, I'm like, I don't even know what that means. I know it's a tough youth tournament, but that means, like, to call it Reno Worlds means nothing to me other than I know it takes place in Reno.
Right.
So, that's bananas, Lars. If you have 51 national titles, you're on the road a lot. You're a road
It's
dog.
crazy impressive. The kid's really good. He's really good. We watched him last week at Iron Elite Nationals. But just it stood out to me when that number came up and I know we've talked about it before, but I don't know. It's just wild to think that there's that many tournaments that can say, they're the Nationals. So
The Nationals.
I just had to get that one off my chest here too.
No, that's what we're here for, to have some wrestling discourse. So I think that will wrap it up for me. I think for Lars probably goes the same. So that was Potentially Dangerous episode 141. You can check us out. We're going to have more content coming from Iowa's Media Day. Hopefully have some videos or something to publish up there online. We'll have our team preview for Iowa. I'm not sure if Nicholas is going to be doing anything on UNI. He pretty much recapped Media Day, which has basically the nuts and bolts until we figure out what's going on at those other weights we talked about. Other than that, just get ready for the season to be in full swing. Thanks for everybody for tuning in that checked out the live broadcast. I don't think we got any Q&A, so we can go ahead and wrap it up. I'm Ross Bartachek with Lars Underbaki. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.